For years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. And by the way, I never went to the island. In one of my very good moments, I turned it down. I didn't want to go to his island.
It began with a denial simple enough to sound believable on television. Donald Trump insisted he barely knew Jeffrey Epstein, that he was not a fan, and that whatever connection people thought existed had been exaggerated into something false. He framed it like two rich men who merely moved through the same Palm Beach circles, nothing more. For years, that line gave him distance from a name that had become radioactive. But one tense night inside the Ed Sullivan Theater, Stephen Colbert built an entire segment around a brutal idea. If the denial was true, the record should support it. And if the record did not, the unraveling would not come from outrage. It would come from receipts. The monologue opened quietly. Colbert did not rush into the joke. Instead, he played clips of Trump brushing off the question. Then Colbert leaned toward the camera and said that if the president claims he barely knew Jeffrey Epstein, maybe we should check.
In 1993, Trump reportedly hosted a party at Mar-a-Lago for young women in a so-called calendar girl competition, and Epstein was the only other guest. Okay. That's not right. If there's only one person invited, that's not a party. That's an appointment for something.
In that moment, the room changed. The giant screen behind him came alive. The first photo appeared. It was not blurry or uncertain. It showed Trump and Epstein together at Mar-a-Lago, standing close enough to weaken the idea of total unfamiliarity. They looked relaxed, smiling, comfortable in each other's company. Colbert let the image breathe, then repeated the phrase "barely knew him" with sarcasm. Then came the second photo, another frame that made the denial sound weaker. The images were doing the damage themselves. He simply kept going. Third photo, fourth photo, fifth photo. Each one stacked on the last until the idea that they were strangers no longer felt flimsy. It felt ridiculous.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
Trump and Epstein at parties, at exclusive events, in the same orbit again and again, not as random figures in the background, but as men at ease in the same world. So he pivoted. Maybe, he said, defenders would argue that they just went to the same parties. Fine. Then he reached to his desk and picked up a printed transcript. The second that page opened, the energy shifted again. Because photos can be waved away by people determined not to see. Words are harder to outrun when they are your own. Colbert adjusted his glasses and began reading a dramatized quote from an old magazine profile, one in which Trump described Epstein as a terrific guy, a lot of fun to be with, someone he had known for years. Colbert paused just long enough to let the phrase "terrific guy" hang in the air, then repeated it more softly, as if it sounded worse the second time.
Trump's having a hard time proving he and Epstein weren't buddies because, according to those who knew them at the time, the two men bonded over a common interest in hitting on and competing for attractive young women at parties. Okay, but maybe they're not friends. Maybe they just have the same hobbies. Honey, Creepy Dave and I are not pals. We're just both avid posters on a Reddit thread called "Let Me See You Sit on That Balloon."
Then came the line about beautiful women, with the chilling suggestion that many of them were on the younger side. That was the moment the room stopped sounding like a comedy taping. Gasps broke out, sharp and involuntary, the kind that happen when an audience stops processing something as entertainment and starts feeling the cold edge of exposure. Colbert lowered the paper and looked directly into the camera. These, he said, were the words at the center of the contradiction. Not rumors, not spin, not someone else's version. He laid it out with ruthless clarity. Either Trump forgot the images existed, forgot the interview existed, forgot that the record has a longer memory than any talking point, or he was counting on everyone else to forget instead. It felt like a summary of an entire strategy. Deny, deflect, dismiss, and trust that exhaustion will finish the job. He slowed everything down and forced the audience to look, one image at a time, one sentence at a time, one contradiction at a time. By the end, the laughter was gone, replaced by eerie silence. Colbert did not need a giant final punchline. The evidence had already become the punchline. He closed by saying that history has a nasty habit of surviving denial, and archives are patient even when politicians are not. That was the line that lingered, because in this dramatized retelling, the real sting was not that a host scored a viral moment. It was that the past refused to stay buried. Trump tried to shrink an entire history into a shrug, into a casual line about barely knowing the man, but the record kept pushing back. Photo after photo, quote after quote, memory after memory. And by the time the cameras cut away, the audience was left with one overwhelming impression. The denial had only sounded strong until the evidence began speaking for itself. What made the segment hit so hard was not volume, it was patience. Colbert let every receipt breathe until the silence itself became part of the takedown, and by the final beat, the room no longer felt amused. It felt cornered by the past. And that was the cliffhanger hanging over the studio when the lights faded. Not whether the denial worked, but how long it could survive.